All right, good evening, everyone. I'm going to use a microphone because we're videoing this. Even though it feels like there's not a lot of people in the room, I'm going to try and stay by their microphone so the video picks this up and we can capture this. So thank you for being here tonight. This is the second of our two information sessions that we are running for the building project. As you know, we've been talking about this building project for a long time. We started our visioning very early, and then we had a long pause while we waited for the full design team. And then now we've been kind of off to the races. And so tonight we are focused very specifically on the overall organization of the buildings. I'm going to have Joe DeSantis, who is from PMA Associates, our owner's project manager, from MLP Integrated Design is Ed Planner, along with Doran Whittier, and tonight we have Brad Dorr and Michelle Rogers, who was here. She just ran to her car to get something from the design team, and we also have Anthony Lepresti here, who is from PMA Associates, who is our, again, our OPM. So tonight we are focusing on really making sure people are clear where we are currently and where we are not yet, because there's lots of questions. Last time we got off on tangents early, and so we're going to try and keep this a little more focused to the topic in the room, and we have a system where we're going to kind of parking lot some questions that you might have. So tonight we're going to talk about, again, the process. We're going to talk about the visioning that we've done to date that Mike has been a part of for the last year and a half, and we're going to talk about both a 6 to 12 option on this campus as well as a 7 to 12 option. That is not the decision. Which one? That's not what we're discussing tonight, because we have to. I feel like I'm Max Headroom in a can you hear that? Yeah. It's kind of wild. What was I saying? So we are not making the decision on 6 to 12 or 7 to 12 tonight. We have to keep both of those options on the table to study with the MSBA through February of 27, this coming February. So the focus tonight is on what we will lay out for a 6 through 12 option and what we would lay out as a 7 through 12 option, as well as a school organizational structure, administrative structure. So that's the focus for tonight. It is not, we're not going to talk about whether you prefer 6 to 12 or 7 to 12. We're not there yet. Lots of time to talk about that in the fall, as well as the construction options. Next month is going to be the first time that Doran Whittier is bringing the possible options to the building committee. And so that will be the first view, and then from September through February of this coming winter, we'll have multiple opportunities where we're going to talk about the actual building design and how all of this theory translates into a building, what the budgets would look like, what is more cost effective, less cost effective. So any of those questions we're going to hold off on. And so during the course of tonight, if you have all the slides, we'll have this QR code in the top right corner. We all have access to the system where those questions are being aggregated. If you have any questions, just keep entering them. It's just a very simple form. Tell me your question. And it will add it into a sheet. If there are questions that are pertinent to tonight, we'll come back and circle back and make sure we answer those. If there are those that are really starting to talk about the budget, the process, the vote, what the building design will be, will it be an addition renovation, or will it be a brand new building? We're going to parking lot those and come back and use that as we continue to develop our FAQ for the website and to push that up. So does that make sense as far as the focus for tonight? Awesome. So with that, I'm going to hand the reins to Joe to give us an overview on where we've been and where we're going.
QR codes up there in the top right. So, hi everyone, I'm Joe DeSantis, Senior Director with PMA Consultants. Does this sound okay? Yeah. All right. We're the Owner's Project Manager representing Triton for the project. Like Brian mentioned, we wanted to start tonight's presentation with a quick discussion about the MSBA Funding Assistance Program, really overview the process, as well as update you on our team's work to date and some of the critical key next steps that we have coming up. So jumping right in, We put this graphic together to really kind of oversimplify the MSBA process. MSBA refers to the steps in their process as modules, so we've kind of taken that terminology here and oversimplified into 9 steps. Module 1, eligibility, is complete. Triton was accepted into the MSBA grant program, very competitive program, took multiple submissions. Module 2, also complete, forming the project team. PMA was brought on board in January of this year. We hired Doran Whittier Architects in April of this year and immediately jumped into Module 3, which is the feasibility study. So the goal of the feasibility study is to provide the design team with enough information about the existing site, the existing building, and more importantly, the educational goals that Triton has moving forward. Give them enough information for them to start generating construction options. And we work through those construction options. We evaluate those through the MSBA feasibility study. Ultimately, the building committee selects one preferred construction option for us to move forward with. I'll repeat that, but I'll keep moving. So there are 2 submissions to the MSBA as part of the feasibility study. The first is the PDP, the Preliminary Design Program, and the second is the PSR, the Preferred Schematic Report. We have a 11 by 17 printout on your tables today with our full detailed project schedule. It also includes a list of acronyms, so you don't have to feel like you write down every acronym I say or have to memorize everything. We've been working hard on the PDP submissions since April. The design team has been really active this summer with over 20 different disciplines making site visits and conducting those existing conditions analysis. Structural engineers, mechanical engineers, site wetland specialists coming out, kind of compiling that information for the design team. Mike is going to speak to some of the educational visioning and programming efforts that have been conducted to date. We're here tonight to speak about the organization of the building. All of this information is what's needed for Doran Whittier to start sharing design options with us. That's actually going to start next month. So September, we're going to see construction options laid out from the design team. In October, we will submit that PDP submission to the MSBA with everything I just talked about, laying the groundwork with all the initial investigations. We're then going to continue into what I mentioned before, the PSR, the Preferred Schematic Report. And really, throughout the development of that Preferred Schematic Report, the design team's refining the options. There's cost estimates performed, but they're really comparative cost estimates in nature. And really the SBC, the School Building Committee, is going to be actively seeking public input from the community in terms of what's important when, comparing these different options against each other, establishing that selection criteria. Like I mentioned before, the PSR and the feasibility study ultimately concludes with the building committee selecting the one preferred construction option. Like Brian mentioned, there will be 6 through 12, grade 6 through 12, and 7 through 12 options on the table. We'll be looking at renovating this existing school. We'll be looking at an addition and renovation option. We'll be looking at new construction options. So we'll be looking at a bunch of different construction options, and we just need to give the design team the information they need to start generating those. We are targeting submission of the PSR to the MSBA in February 2027. So we then get into Module 4, schematic design, which is really refinement of that one preferred option. Defining things such as the exterior materials, interior finishes, HVAC mechanical systems, right, with specificity to establish our total project budget. We'll then submit our schematic design and DESI packages to the MSBA in August of 27, seeking MSBA funding approval, scope and budget approval, and we'll be ready for MSBA Module 5, which is local funding approval, in November 2027. I mentioned that we have the 11 by 17 kind of detailed schedule as a handout tonight. Just one note on that. We have dates on there beyond November 2027. Just know that those are preliminary for now. Those dates, really, they speak to Module 6 and 7, detailed design and construction. Those timelines are going to depend on the option selected. So just keep that in mind. Those are kind of preliminary for now. Wrapping this up, we worked with the school building committee to compile a lot of this information into a one-page summary, which is also on your tables tonight. Really just the intention was to share information with the public. So there's a section on project background, there's the roadmap highlighting a lot of the dates I just spoke to and our next steps, and there's critically, the how to get involved section with our social media, project website, the email page, as well as the YouTube for meetings. At this point, if there's any questions about the MSBA process or the timeline, like Brian mentioned, we would ask that you please scan the QR code so that we can continue with what we're here to talk about tonight, and we're happy to circle back on those at the end of the meeting. I think, Mike, I will call you up. Thank you. You can just press right or use this. The down arrow? The right arrow.
Okay, all right, thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Mike Perolo, Principal Educational Planner and Consultant with MLP, My Learning Place Integrated Design. Also a former educator in the North Shore area, mostly in Newburyport, also in Wakefield and Tewksbury. So I've been in the world of education for a while, and now I'm supporting districts and architects working on these design projects. So excited to be here tonight. I'll just share a couple of slides with you. As Brian mentioned, we went through an extensive visioning process that was well over a year. Actually, we started just over a year ago today, starting with identifying overarching guiding principles for the project, which derive from a number of things. We had conversations with small leadership groups, with large educator groups. We had visioning sessions with over 50 people, sitting in table groups like this, where there were educators and parents and community members, local businesses gathered together, really to talk about what the future of education might be, should be, given where the world is headed, where jobs are headed, technology is headed. And so the slides I'm going to share, just a few slides, are really the outcomes from a lot of those conversations that we had about teaching learning and the spaces needed to support them. Yes?
I just wanted to mention that a lot of us can't submit questions because there isn't a strong enough live signal, or is there like another way we might be able to just like do post-it notes or?
Yeah, we can. Do you want me to sit up while we're working on the technology?
I was gonna say, let me figure out the guest Wi-Fi.
Thank you so much. I just didn't want to get too far in while we couldn't see.
Appreciate that.
But, so you don't, yeah.
On the Triton guest Wi-Fi, it's also not working. Oh, really? Yeah. It's not strong enough.
One of the reasons we need a new building, ladies and gentlemen. So in the meantime, a teacher's always prepared. So that's why I put the post-it notes there for an activity, but also for if this happens. So go ahead and write your post-it notes down, and then we'll just hold on to them, and we'll get a piece of chart paper to create a little parking lot, okay? Absolutely, thank you. Okay. So let me share a few slides about some of the project goals. So you can see up here, these are the overarching goals that are kind of leading the work of the district and the design team. Looking for really an environment, a building that can be flexible to support a much more hands-on experiential experience for students, not this typical just sit in a classroom anymore. That's not really the world of education. Kids are up and moving, collaborating, doing a lot of work that really are pushing them to kind of be in the driver's seat. Second one, anyone who enters the building really will have a safe and welcoming environment. That not only speaks to students, but the community as well, who use this building and this campus as really an asset. Spaces that support and prioritize physical and mental health. So we talked a lot about, who kids are just as human beings. There's lots of social, emotional elements and impacts now on the world on who these students are. And so what are those experiences that they also need beyond academics, and how can we give them and their teachers just even a moment to take a breath throughout the day. Spaces that support collaboration and connection. I talked about that more collaborative approach to education. A place where students can explore different pathways towards being more contributing citizens and adults. And then also promoting this sense of district pride, community pride overall in the building. Some specific themes that came out of the visioning work. You'll see there is some redundancy in these slides, and that's kind of purposeful. It's because these things kept coming up again and again as goals. So this student experience really comes first, this sense of belonging and community. You'll see some of the explorations that you're actually going to talk about tonight is how we can best organize the building to allow for 6th graders or 7th graders or even 12th graders to really developmentally find that appropriate level of community and connection. Learning that prepares students for a changing world, supporting student well-being, as I mentioned on the last slide, and really moving beyond the one-size-fits-all of learning. So as you went from the parking lot to the library here, everything looks the same. Every classroom's the same. Every space is the same. And so what does that building need to be to really support the fact that every single person, every single one of us as adults and as learners really needs kind of something different, and how do we provide that opportunity for everybody? So what you're going to see now are different models and organizations of things that the groups have talked about so far, both in small leadership groups and in some larger visioning groups as well. These blocks do not necessarily represent like a building. What they're just representing is just a grouping of kids, right? So this is your current school organization, where 7th and 8th grade is really acting as its own kind of isolated middle school, and then grades 9 to 12 kind of run in their own model as the high school. Yes, there are classrooms where the 7th and 8th graders are. There's pods where those teams are working, but then students venture out into some of those public spaces like the cafeteria, the gyms, art rooms, things like that, that are shared between all of the students grades 7 to 12. So we started asking, what should that future be in a 6 through 12 model and a 7 through 12 model? So I'm going to share what those different considerations are, and then we're actually going to turn it over to you to talk about those in small groups, and then we'll have whole group conversation as well. Any update on the Wi-Fi? Just checking in. Brian? No? Any update on the Wi-Fi?
No, messaging.
Okay, great. So keep those, what's that? Oh, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, that's perfect. So if you have Post-its, in a couple minutes, we're going to break into the small group activities. You can start putting the parking lot sticky notes up there, and then hopefully some of those questions, if we can get to them tonight, we will, okay? Okay. So in a 6 to 12 model, can I take this? I feel I'm not good just standing in one spot. That's so not me. Okay, so in a 6 to 12 model, we looked at different explorations, really two kind of options here. We asked ourselves and the educators, do we want 6th grade to be a bit more, as we say, like insular? Do we want to give them a more protected kind of transitional year, knowing that 6th graders who are currently living an elementary experience and moving up to a middle high school model, do we want to give them kind of their own experience experientially, or maybe even spatially? Do they have a pod where they're working together as a team of educators and students together? And yes, they'll have shared spaces like the cafeteria, the gym, and things like that. But for the majority of the day, they're kind of hanging out and doing their core academics right there with that core group of teachers that are 6th grade teachers. Option 2 is, do we create a model where 6th, 7th, and 8th are really connected and kind of work as a middle school? Very much like the model that you currently have, but just bringing 6th grade into that picture and allowing those 3 grades to really follow this kind of middle school presence and experience. Again, they venture out for those shared experiences in art rooms and gyms and theaters and things like that. But their main core academics, their social studies, their world languages, their maths, their sciences would be in those kind of 6th, 7th, and 8th grade classrooms. So where the group kind of landed is they felt that this would be the model that they would be comfortable with in terms of a future educational vision. So kind of following the model that is similar to today, but again, adding 6th grade to the picture. So we would run an independent middle school of grades 6 to 8 and an independent high school of grades 9 to 12. Still 2 separate administrations, so 2 different principals, 2 different presence in the building, again, sharing those core spaces in the center. Yeah. Any questions about what these points are in this model before we move on to the activity? Yes, correct. Yep. So literally, it's 7th grade works in a team. It's slightly going to be a tiny bit different next year because some teachers will be 7th grade. Some teachers may have 7th grade classes and 8th grade classes because there's a bit of a difference in population, but they'll, for the most part, continue to remain in those teams organizationally. And yes, there'll still be a middle school principal and middle school guidance, middle school, all those things. Mm-hmm. Yes.
This might be one of the frequent questions, but what was driving the current preferred option versus the 2?
Yeah, great question. Do you want to weigh in on that, or do you want? Did you hear the question?
I did. So what's driving the preferred option versus,
Keeping them insular, or I would imagine, not bringing them up from elementary school.
Like sixth grade kind of being its own kind of,
To a preferred, so I'm just kind of curious what's driving the preferred.
so again, not deciding whether we want 6 to 12 or 7 to 12. If we're bringing sixth grade up to this campus, the value is to create a truer middle school, right? Most middle schools are 6 to 8, many 5 to 8. So currently, we have a 2-year, it's really a junior high model that we've kind of worked into a middle school. So the thinking behind the proposal years ago when we said we would consider studying sixth grade, excuse me, was that so we would have a truer elementary, a truer middle school experience, and a truer high school experience. And so rather than, I don't know if you've heard these discussions, right? Students transition for a year in 7th grade, they have a year to get used to the campus, and then they spend their 8th grade year getting used to and ready for high school. So it would give a full 3 years. Ideally, I would love to move 5th and 6th up and have a true separate 5th and 6th, 5th through 8 middle school, just by the nature of the structure and the way this campus was created as original in the 60s with a regional campus, and then as it was renovated in 2000 as a middle school, but still just 7 and 8. So that would be the reason, not for bringing the 6th grade, but if we did, it would be for the purpose of having a unique and separate middle school.
Value is the more time for transition, or like not having to transition. For the value, is the value that transitional period?
I think having a longer time to create a school culture, right? We have 7, if you do preschool, you might have 9 years at the elementary level, at least usually 6 or 7, 2 years at the middle, and then 4 years at the high school. You'd have that opportunity to be able to have a true full middle school experience for 3 years, giving more of an opportunity to have that culture. Again, 4 years would be better. I think when we talk about the 7 through 12 model, one of the strengths is in a unified school would be removing one more transition, but we'll get to that afterwards. You had a question?
Yeah, so how would it affect like athletics and arts? What do the other competitor schools do for middle school? Are kids missing out because they only are 7th, 8th, and 6th graders at other schools? Or?
No, so it's the structure that we have now as 2 separate, completely operating schools on a unified campus has middle school teachers and high school teachers, art, music, PE, unified arts, separate at the high school. So I don't think it doesn't change any of the experiences. The only interaction on a daily basis within this campus is a shared cafeteria. So they pass in the halls, some of the music spaces down in that corner. And there's 2 distinct gyms currently. But the current model where there are 2 separate schools, I don't believe is a disadvantage, no. Yeah.
but you're asking specifically about like sports teams?
So currently, thank you, currently an 8th grader, keep me honest, an 8th grader can play up if we have a waiver on a high school team. That would be the same case, I guess technically 7th grade could too, right? Obviously, we're talking about developmentally appropriate in size, and there's lots of opportunities for discussion there, or things to discuss. We routinely are running waivers for high school athletics for 8th grade students, pretty normal. So in the current model, where it's a separate school, separate principal, you don't care about this, but literally the Department of Ed has codes for a high school and a middle school. A 7th or 8th grader can't play on a high school team without a waiver. When we get to a 7 through 12 option as a unified school, all that goes away and it's a single school, and there's an advantage there for athletics. But currently, there isn't an advantage or disadvantage, and it would operate the same way, adding 6th grade into that structure. Yeah.
This model with the shared community spaces, I'm not quite sure how it works now. Do they try to sort of stagger it so they're not in there at the same time? Like, maybe like a 6th grader popping into the library at the same time as a senior?
Yes. So up until this year, literally, students ride the bus to and from school together, right? So their middle and high schoolers are on the bus together. Once they come in, middle schoolers, when you drive on campus, the big blue wall to the right is the middle school, big blue wall to the left is the high school. Students literally go in opposite directions. They are never in the cafeteria together. They're never in the gym in the same space together. It's mostly, or in classrooms together. They cross in the hallways, right? So you might be going through a hallway that has high school classes happening as a middle schooler, and vice versa. That's not true. Actually, the high schoolers are never in the middle school because all of theirs are on this side of the doors. So in a model where we're talking about a new school, there would still be those shared spaces scheduled separately.
And in a new in a new building, spatially, it would be organized in a much more efficient way to create that level of appropriate developmental separation. So in a lot of options we're exploring now, it's having, pods, academic pods, essentially, meaning a collection of classrooms where the sixth graders would be, and seventh graders would be, eighth graders would be. 9 through 12 can, mix and mingle because they're going to different levels of classes anyway. But in the center, that kind of connect all these academic pods are really where the shared spaces are. So kids are going in and out. They're not going through to get to the other side of the building, which currently happens now.
So any solution, add, reno, knock down, rebuild, is a more efficient building, right? We talked about the fact if you are in that far corner as a middle school student upstairs on the 3rd floor, and you're going to band literally in that corner, it's a 5-minute walk without stopping. So, right, all of those things go away when we talk about redesigning a building, even if it ends up being an ad reno of the existing space, to create far more efficiency and appropriate interactions between middle schoolers and high schools.
So ultimately, these are great questions, and I think these questions are going to lead to the conversations that we actually want you to have right now in small table groups. So in a second, I'm actually going to ask, I'll put a poster here and I'll put a poster back there. And I'm going to ask anybody that isn't necessarily sitting at a table if you can come and join one of these tables that have some markers and posters. What we're actually going to do is, just going to put that down for a second. You're going to see that I'm putting these posters at each table. Is it okay? I'm not on mic right now. Sure. I'll use my normal. Oh, wow, fancy, thank you. Okay, I'm putting this chart at each table, and you're going to see there's 3 different questions, topics that we want you to think about. What opportunities does this model create? Question 2, what concerns or trade-offs could this organization create? And then what are some of the, what has to be true for this to be successful? Like, meaning, if we did go with a 6 to 12 model where 6th, 7th, and 8th graders were going to be in this middle school experience, what has to be true for you to be comfortable with that? What level of separation do they need to have? How do you truly feel about them having different academics or different teachers or different administrators, or do you feel like they're going to have less of an identity that way? So essentially kind of respond to the different things we've been talking about tonight. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. So if I can, and ask if you're not at a table that has materials, so anybody sitting on the periphery, if you can join, you can use the Post-it notes that are in front of you. You can to write on Post-it notes and put on the chart, or you can write directly on the chart with your pens and your markers. Let's say, once you get settled, I'll give the final direction. I love how you guys are already mixing and mingling. I'll take them for you. Okay, so let's do this. Let's chat. Let's have you guys chat in small groups. I don't want you to get just lost in conversation, though. Make sure you're recording your thoughts down on these charts. Let's give you like 10 minutes, and then we'll have a whole group conversation. But get as much detail as you can on these charts, okay? No, I got them right here. If you, are you guys? Why don't you join another group?
Mike, why don't we start a 3rd table? Go ahead, stay here, we'll do a 3rd table. I don't want to be on the side. They already started. All right. All right. I guess we
we don't have enough. You guys can join this one.
Go over there, all right.
Are you participating in the?
You're the committee.
Yeah, I don't think they're allowed to participate.
They're committee members.
Okay. You guys can.
That, all right.
Here, you want to drag it over?
Yeah.
We moved
Was
in,
it a whole mock-in rebuild?
and they were like, so we
We
did it
didn't
March.
care for the like the starting.
Just awesome. So you said Pine Grove enrollment's going up, Newbury and Salisbury are going. That's why
A variety of unrelated questions.
We separate generally the younger kids in the front and the kids in the back, so we put parameters in place.
If we have another mic, and then I'll carry a mic around to people so that you're, when you get to the question and answer.
feel like Bob Barker. Are you guys good to go to a whole group conversation?
Opportunities doesn't create, I would put retention.
How about we give you guys 2 more minutes? Try to get as much done as you can. Are you guys good with 2 more minutes?
Yeah, just, I overheard. Yeah, I just overheard they don't co-op with.
But then when he went to eighth grade, when he went to a freshman year, he was like, oh, I don't have a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, so they play for Triton, right? There is no.
I just heard someone die
That could be accurate. When you were here, was it still co-op? That's too far ago for it to have been. My guess is that probably is still the case. He just died.
Oh, okay. Adding into some of our discussions. Fields, all those other.
Yeah, so the way those work is back in your
Okay.
ultimately MIA wants every team, every school running through this where there's we have a striker on actually it's Triton for football. So Triton is youth. So it's Triton youth. And so that's why they wanted
Right.
Sometimes.
So it's November.
So it's always a 2 year. It's not like, hey, we're running a co-op for a decade.
So if you were to go there, if you would literally bus your kids over there and you were full-time beavers.
So there won't be, and I'm sure. I was just going to ask that question. I'm sure switch, you know what I mean? But by and large, no, they're coming to here. Well, that's been talking to Trey, so I'm sure that always means that, you know, it's home. So we have things.
What about other events, like something at a prom? Junior, senior.
We've never done it with other schools.
George, oh, I just heard Georgetown.
Yeah, it's really just
So just sports.
sports.
What about like your DECA programs or?
Again, it's just, those can be small. It's the teams where you need a large enough student base to feel the team safely. So like football, baseball.
Oh, you mentioned lacrosse.
Currently running one. Right? So I think
Wrestling.
no, we've always had a strong wrestling program. That's always been. And we've never had right, so it needs to be a need where it strengthens our program. If we've got enough to feel like our speed, it doesn't make sense. So we're light on football. Ipswich couldn't feel the team. Right, so literally we just barely feel like this is like strength.
Good to know.
All right. So you're with EMA or?
No, I'm with Dorn Whittier. Nice to meet you. Yes.
She's gonna pass it around to them.
Getting my notebook so I can take notes. And here I am, like, doing sticky notes.
I'll show you the video. My first year superintendent. They did a little. Welcome. Yeah, Mercury Tracer, 1995, baby. First year teacher.
All right, everybody, let's come back together and let's chat. Should have brought my chime. I know. All right, let's come back together. You were having some really good conversations in small groups, but let's bring it to a whole group conversation. Let's kind of go in order, and Narissa's going to walk around with a mic so that way we can hear you nice and clearly and get it on the record. Let's start with opportunities first, and then we'll work our way down. Do you want to talk about what your groups talked about? Who wants to share?
Yeah.
Summarize for some of our groups. So more time together in the middle school, more time to adjust, the exposure to sports and arts at an earlier age, so those sixth graders, giving them more options. Let's see, eighth graders who are advanced could have access to more advanced coursework, more balanced experience, and again, more access to team sports and other activities for sixth graders. Anything else? Was that it? Or you want us to go to concerns?
Sure, you can, go for the whole chart, that's fine.
Okay, sorry, we didn't really talk about these all. Do you want me to read them all or just summarize?
Summarize, yeah. You guys were overachievers, so you read as much as you want.
So we kind of all wrote, but I think the themes was just concern, like a lot of us their kids are very happy at their current elementary school, and so sort of why change what's not broken.
That's interesting.
A lot of people love comments here at Pine Grove, so very happy there. Want them to stay at Pine Grove forever. Let's see. The possible loss of funding for Pine Grove now that they have less students. The concern about sixth graders adjusting, and especially even if there is some shared spaces, even the hallways, concern about sixth graders and 12th graders still being together, and that could feel overwhelming to sixth graders to such a big school. So just a big gap for sixth graders who are still so small and tiny.
Yeah. Question on that though, like as a counterpoint? Just as a counterpoint for that is like, I don't know about Pine Grove, and I'm talking about NES specifically, but we do pre-K to sixth grade. So what would be the difference from sixth grade to 12th grade versus, kindergarten to sixth grade at the elementary level? I'm just wondering what the thought process was behind whoever.
I can
Yes.
share one.
Yes.
I mean, I thought about this before coming because I had a 3-year-old at the preschool at Pine Grove, and obviously it's going to go all the way up to 6th. I feel like it's a much more contained place. You're with your teachers walking you around from place to place, and they're very separate in their own areas of the building. I mean, I'm not up here, but to me, my concern was more that informal, unstructured, I'm thinking like the bus, I'm thinking hallways, like you're very sheltered in elementary, moving group to group. So I think that's why to me, that's why it stuck out more than, I haven't had a concern at all with the pre-K up to 6th.
So can I ask a follow-up then? I want to hear sorry. Let me ask a follow-up to that, and both groups can weigh in. What really has to be true about the way the building is organized, or like the schedule is put in place, the admin that's put in place, that would make you feel comfortable when you to like alleviate these non-structured kind of moments? Like what has to really be put in place for you to have a higher sense of comfort? And anybody can answer that.
Is there a way to stagger the start times for the middle school versus the high school, dismissal and things like that, or is that a bus constraint?
So I went to a school that was a middle school, and then they transitioned it, moved it, and attached it to the high school, made it 6th through 8th. And it was the way that I'm picturing that you guys have talked about it, where it was totally separate. 6th through 8th was in this building, 6th was pretty much in its own little area, 7th was over here, 8th was here, and then it was attached by the gym. And there was actually like a separation, and you didn't see anybody. The high school, they were like attached, but you never saw anybody.
It's not like a formal separation between middle school and high school. It sounds like what needs to be true.
Just middle school principal hat on. We never let our 6th and 7th graders in any of the middle schools that I ever worked in just walk around the school kind of aimlessly from place to place. It was still a very really protected kind of escorting through the building, especially our 5th and 6th graders. When I was in Haverhill, we walked them everywhere. And it was to have those extra eyes on them. And then our 7th and 8th graders, as they got a little bit older, we gave them a little bit more freedom to prep them for high school. But I think when it comes to structures like that, setting that up, that will ultimately be building administration setting that up based on the option.
Question for either how it is currently designed or plans for the future. Like, are bathrooms shared, or are there bathrooms in each classroom? Because I would imagine that kids are allowed to go to the bathroom when they want.
So nothing's designed yet. So at current 7th grade, middle school students only leave the middle school confines if they're being escorted going to, like I said, if they're going to lunch, if they're going to gym, or they're going to music. Those are the only times they're venturing into the high school space. No. And a high schooler is not ever going into the middle school academic space. Yep.
And again, it hasn't been designed yet, but typically in contemporary buildings, in the very close, if not within, a learning pod. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
Right next to you.
Right, thanks, Brian. Whether it's within the learning community or literally right next to it is typically a bathroom for that grouping of kids. So it's not like, it may be a 7th grader and an 8th grader, but it's very unlikely outside of like the bathroom that's associated with the gym and the cafeteria. But those kids are only going to be typically with those middle school kids at that time anyway because of the schedule of lunch. They're not going to necessarily like have completely opposite grades, or maybe they will, but again, that can be an organizational administrative function. I want to go back though. I don't want to lose your point. Do you want to keep going with your, are there other?
I guess for the it has to be true, which is just along with this sort of like thoughtfully separating so that it's all developmentally appropriate. And I think, again, we had a lot of sort of talk about Pine Grove and Raleigh. One of the things that seems to be in place now is that those kids really seem ready by the time they're done with 6 to transition up. So just really thoughtfully thinking about how would that change, what would be put in place to really work on that independence and confidence and transition earlier, because one of the things we talked about is it's a bigger leap than, say, a town where you're going from your small elementary school and you're just in the same town up to a smaller middle school and then later it's a smaller high school. It's a big leap, I think, to go from those contained elementary schools to a big regional combined campus. So right now Pine Grove is doing that. I don't know about the other schools, I'm sorry. Pine Grove seems to be doing that really well, and the kids seem ready for that. So just making sure we don't lose that. And that was kind of a theme of us, like not dismantling what seems to be working.
Steal your mic. All 4 of mine went to Pine Grove. My youngest is a 6th grader this year. And they are ready to move on, which I agree with you, but they have a lot of their friends are struggling with the standards that they feel like they're being held with to the little kids, the kindergartners. So I think Pine Grove has a lot of room for a lot of opportunity to help those kids feel like big kids. And I feel like we're not doing that. And my kids love Pine Grove, and I love Pine Grove. I've been there for more than a decade with 4 kids. But I think the big kids need more moments to be big kids and be responsible. So I having older kids, I have a little bit of a different viewpoint on that.
How many kids come together from all 3 schools to join the 7th grade, on average, rough estimates?
So on average, around 140, 150. So a middle school is around 300, about 150 in each grade level. Again, it fluctuates. Some years are big, some years are small, but on average around 150. So it's between 45, I would say, like, if you look over the last handful of years, between 45 and 65 on average per school. And then there's been some bumps, some 80s. So yes. Which I'm going to go back to history. When this campus was built, there were about 1,200 kids at the high school and 700 some odd students at the middle school.
So how many kids are currently at sixth grade? Like, is there a drop off from, if you add the sixth graders from one year at the 3 schools to 7th grade, like, are they going to a private middle school or something like that?
So we do lose students to private, and we tend to lose them if they're going to St. John's Prep. Yeah. They sometimes will even go in 5th when they added the grade there. So that, I think the private school is a family decision choice, as something I feel like we can target and say, why are you leaving? And we try and find that information. So we tend to lose, yes, a handful from 6 to 7, and then we lose a larger percentage from 8 to 9 because you add Whittier into the mix and other private high schools. Yeah.
Anything else does this group want to share? Anything that was different?
Was there anything? I think we had a lot of the same things. Retention was one. I wasn't leading that conversation. Who was talking about retention? Can anybody speak to that?
I think to your question, at least with my kids, we've seen a handful that don't come to Triton Middle School, but most of the kids are at Triton Middle School, but a lot of them are planning before they got to middle school where they're going to high school. I wonder if we had what felt a little bit more or less transitional, if we would have better retention. That's speculation on my part, but I think if they felt more a part of the community and like this wasn't just a stopping over point, would we hold on to more kids? And it's just something I think about, because I feel like there are a lot of kids who either are already planning on moving on before they even get here, and some of them get a little lost in the shuffle, which is true, because it is a big jump. I mean, my daughter's 6th grade class has 43 or 44 kids in it. And I think NES also has a very small 6th grade, and so does Salisbury. So this is going to be a very small year. But even though it's a small year, I mean, that's still, so it's still a giant shift for them.
I think what we said was, especially the 6th, we said you basically have a year to figure it out, was what you said, and that's when it hit me. You have a year to figure it out, and then you're already planning in 8th grade, right? Like what you're going to do. And so if you enable that sort of year to figure out in 6th grade, 7th grade, you can kind of like get your bearings before you're just making that decision. Yeah.
I think that we covered some of the trade-offs. So like accelerating the more adult behavior. I was thinking, exposure to more social media. And this idea around like potentially sacrificing elementary traditions. I recognize that they have recess here, but maybe like the facilities don't necessarily match what they have in elementary school. So there's not a playground, and I don't have a 6th grader. I don't know if kids want to play on a playground, but they at least have that option. So that kind of leads into what would need to be true for the, okay, hey, there we go. I didn't have a chance to talk to my group about this, but I know it's something that my family and I talk a lot about, is that the scores of the elementary school that our kids are currently in are just higher than that at the middle school, high school. I recognize that I am not an educator. I don't know all the things that go into those scores, but as a layperson, it's something that's on my mind when you talked about, going to St. John's Prep or choicing out. It's one more year that my child is in a higher rated school is something that I'm thinking about. But I don't want to speak for my group, so just acknowledging that that's an N of 1. And then when we talked about what would need to be true for this to be successful, we were kind of just getting into that, but it just sounds like a lot of formal separation, ensuring that there is very controlled exposure from, the older kids to the younger kids, for safety's sake.
All right, so let's talk about, and we may come back to the sixth grade conversation, but in the meantime, let's talk about this. Brian, can you hold these for a second? Thanks. Let's talk about the 7 to 12 and the considerations, and we'll chat about that. So in terms of the organization for grades 7 to 12, the leadership and the folks that were involved in the visioning conversations talked about a lot of these options. So again, C is kind of the current model that you have, right? 7th and 8th grades connected as kind of this middle school community, and 9 to 12 is their community, again, those shared spaces. D looks at, does 7th grade and 8th grade get closer connected to 9th grade? Because 9th grade in reality also has some interesting transitional moments as well, because there's some kids are very developmentally still 8th graders into the fall or winter of 9th grade year. But then some folks said, well, are we pulling 9th graders down, or are we pulling 8th graders up? And there's pros and cons to that. E looks at, do we really create this kind of like insular protected experience for 7th grade, like we talked about 6th grade? Not that we're like putting them on an island of their own, right? They may still very much be in a learning community right next to grade 8, but maybe they have some different experiences. Maybe they have some different specials added in, or they do some special events, or administration just gives them a little bit of a heavier touch to kind of support that transition. And then F is, what if we just allow all the kids to kind of be together and live in one world, one community? It doesn't mean that a 7th grader is going to take an academic class next to a 12th grade class, but there's very limited levels of separation. And so where the group landed is somewhere kind of in this world of what you currently have, so C and E. What's interesting is that 7th grade right now in this graphic is kind of a bubble around it, because administration is still saying, what can we do to allow 7th grade to have this protected experience? What can we do socially, emotionally, and developmentally to really ensure that they have proper transitions to like be successful? Meaning, some of the things we're talking about are, and this goes beyond space, like what are the specials that a 7th grader takes? Do we think about giving 7th graders more requirements of like take art, take world language, take these things, and then in 8th grade you start to get more opportunities and choice, and then it allows you to kind of then lead that path, kind of like you were describing, like this is your year to get it right and figure it out, and then so you can move on. But again, spatially it doesn't have an impact. So really where we're landing is a model where it's a single administration. So it's one school. It's not necessarily this model of Triton Middle High School anymore. It's I don't know what the name is. We haven't gone into that like granular level of detail, but it's one school, it's one community, it's one administration. So there's no longer a middle school front door and high school front door, middle school main office, high school main office. There's one main office. There may be folks that are dedicated to certain grades to allow for those kids to be a bit more comfortable and have that transition, but it's really truly kind of one identity. In the model, 7th and 8th grades still would interact in their kind of dedicated learning communities. So, maybe this dotted line is here, but it's also kind of really here. The reason that we didn't extend the dotted line here is because 8th graders really, as I mentioned before, will have opportunities. Like, yes, they'll stay in their learning community, but maybe they have that opportunity to go take a higher level math class in a 9th grade class or something like that. And then grades 9 to 12 really would still operate in that typical high school schedule. But everybody in the building would have the same schedule overall. It's just kind of protecting and containing 7th and 8th graders in those learning communities, and again, going out into those shared spaces. Questions about this model? Yeah.
You're gonna hate me. Could I, as educators and as someone who is not one, could we maybe have a little bit of like a primer on kind of developmental taxonomy? We're talking a lot about grades and how schools are generally broken up by grades and what a building, but if we were to look at just the kids' developmental progression, are there like natural breaks?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I wish you were part of the early, I'm sorry, do you want me to? Sorry, this is like my passion project.
Oh, great. Please enlighten me.
In the yeah, we're going to be here for a while. In the larger visioning sessions, we actually, the whole first 3-hour session was all about the developmental needs kids. So we brought in developmental research. There's a book called Yardsticks from this author called Chip Wood, who was part of the Responsive Classroom organization, who is a worldwide, nationwide, all over, focuses on the developmental needs of kids and the structures that we put in place for academics, for social emotional impacts, things like that. So we actually brought charts that had each grade level and the span, like how a 6th and 7th grader, where that, kind of gray area is, and allowed people to have conversations of like what was more appropriate. Are 6th graders more like 7th graders? Where is that kind of break developmentally? What's interesting is like the reason that 6th through 8th graders are kind of in that group together is because developmentally they are kind of in that same world. They're going through puberty, they're going through angst, they're going through that drama. Physically, their bodies are really changing because obviously of that puberty. But I always say that like development follows a predictable pattern, but at a different rate and at a different level for every kid. Right? Based on gender, based on socioeconomic status, based on trauma, based on upbringing, based on so many different things. But I appreciate why you're asking that, because I think it's like having that information could help weigh in on some of this information, right? Absolutely.
So what are the what's the developmental taxonomy? Like what are kind of like the generally accepted developmental breaks aside from grades? Like, I mean, is it kindergarten through 4th, then there's 5th and 6th, then there's 6th and 7th? And
of the
like,
biggest
is that
shifts
what,
and
like,
changes?
say that?
Of the biggest shifts and changes
Yes.
developmentally?
Yes. What
Yes.
are the big shifts?
If you
'Cause,
look
like,
at the continuum of a kid's academic and social emotional growth, there's really interesting breaks. It's like, and my mind just works in grade levels, so just stay with me because I know you're not looking for grade levels. But like the age ranges of a kid between 3rd and 4th grade, and there are a number of different age ranges, that's why I just stick to grades. Then there's the shift between 7th and 8th grade. And there's an interesting shift that actually happens between 10th and then the upper grades, because kids start to go from this like, who am I discovery to like, what am I going to do and how am I going to take on the world? And now I've got to figure out this graduation piece, which then impacts their just social emotional development.
So I think that helps me to understand, because you're saying that there's a shift in the 4th, 5th grade. So obviously they're still in elementary. Then there's a shift at 7th grade. So now we're talking about 7th plus, and then another at, you said 10th grade?
Around there.
Okay, that's so helpful.
And so, but what's really interesting is that when we had the larger visioning sessions, I'll be honest, a lot of folks felt strongly like maybe 6th grade going up to the middle school makes more sense because it allows them to get settled and get comfortable before they hit that year. Because Rich will tell you, he said he taught 7th grade, I taught 7th grade. I mean, that was the year I lost the majority of my hair. It was a year, truly. I loved them, but my God, they struggled. They couldn't get out of their own way just personally and socially to even be able to handle the academics. So if there were things put in place ahead of time for them. And I think that's why we look at this and say, like, how can we support 7th graders, still create a team structure for them or the opportunity to be a team if they want to be a team, but then as 8th graders still create that, but maybe what opportunities can they have to explore a class at a higher level?
So I think there's a reason why the typical, if you look at the typical middle school or elementary is preschool, sometimes you do an early, primary, but elementary is through 4th, middle school is 5 to 8, and high school is 9 through 12. So you're hitting those developmental periods in stride in the middle of a community and not at a transition point, right? So that is if you look at the typical structure in any, for a state department or nationally, that's generally the breakdown is a transition to middle school in 5th or 6th. And I think for that reason, and then high school, you're hitting that kind of midway through that developmental milestone within a transition, a grade level transition.
So you're not going through that developmental and organizational transition at the same time? Yep. All I needed to know. Thank you.
Yeah, just generally though, you want to try to minimize as many transitions, right, for the kids? Okay, and then how often do ninth graders have classes with 12th graders? Is there an opportunity for seventh and eighth graders to have, you know, a CAD class with seniors or, you know, a programming class? Like, is that a possibility in a 7 to 12 model where there's just deeper, you know, potential for technical development at a much younger age if they're ready for it?
Yeah, so two things there. One, yes. So for me, in this model, one of the greatest strengths is we're eliminating a transition, right? You transition, you spend, again, 7, 8, 9 years at the elementary, transition into seventh to one school, one culture, one community, and you're there for 7 years. Middle school teacher, we talked about the fact that it's hard for the middle school to not feel like they get what's left over from the high school. It's just the nature of the beast in any middle school that you go to. So to have one school eliminates an entire transition. So for a child's entire 13-year, 15 with 2 years of preschool academic career, they transition one culture and community one time. That's significant. As far as the classes, a unified, currently now, and would be in either of these 6 through 12 or 7 through 12 options, we're not a big enough school where we're going to have entirely separate middle school and high school staff. This coming year, six or seven departments are sharing staff between the middle school and the high school. That doesn't mean it's a seventh grader sitting with a senior. That just means a teacher might teach 4 sections of high school and then go teach 1 section of middle school. So that is happening, would continue to happen in either of these models. An added benefit in a single school with a single administration scheduling those students is when a student is developmentally ready and academically ready. Would a 7th grade be sitting with a senior? Probably pretty rare, but could it happen if that student is developmentally ready and skills-wise able to, and there's a aligned schedule that allows that? Absolutely. I think it would happen more routinely for 8th graders than 7th graders, but that is to have unified departments, again, in a 6 through 12 where we've got a 6 to 8 middle school, tech ed and unified arts and all those, they're still working together and shared. To have one school department programming and creating programming for all students, there is a huge value add there for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think in high school, some of my favorite classes were, you know, an accounting class with seniors or an art class with older kids, because you just grow up so much quicker when you're watching what they're doing, how their mind's working in a more creative setting. So.
And can I just, when you say growing up quicker, in a good way? Yes, just making sure. We're talking a lot of developmental here.
Yeah, but
right?
that's structured, right? I mean, you're in a classroom. Hopefully, there's a teacher there, right? So
yes. Yes, let's go beyond hopefully. There is a teacher there. Yeah.
And I spent too much time together. That's where I went to. I was like,
yeah.
oh dear God, he means like, yeah, good things.
Yeah, and yeah, absolutely.
So this moving up to older grades, you envision that only happening if it's a unified structure. So if it's the previous version where, like, you know, 6 and 7, or like if there's a separate middle school and high school, there isn't as much of an opportunity to kind of grade up, if you will. I don't know what you
I would say not impossible.
But harder.
Harder.
Okay.
Far more efficient system with a single structure, yes. A middle school teacher.
This is a little bit off topic, but his comment made me think of it. I don't know what the current offerings for CTE are in this district, but I know one of the focuses in my district when we built our new high school was to really expand those offerings. And I'm just wondering if this building plan is giving thought to expanding those CTE offerings. Oh, sorry.
Career technical education. So if
We have too many acronyms in education.
Currently, if our students choose a career technical education path, they go to Whittier, right? That school is designed for career and technical education. There is a push across the state because there is just simply not enough seats available in those schools. So there are a lot of students who don't have an opportunity to go to Whittier and really need to for whatever reason. Or want to, right, yeah. So That came up as a topic in our fall visioning sessions. Again, 40 some odd people in this room, parents, students, educators. That is something to explore. We're exploring it. It's really challenging. I don't know if I'm giving away, you teach in Salem, right? The new Salem High School, if you look at the price tag, is not a price tag that's going to happen in Triton, right? So we're not going to get the state reimbursement they got. There's just a lot of factors. So it is absolutely something we're exploring, not something I can say to you, hey, here's what we're thinking. We're exploring it with the Department of Ed. We're exploring it with neighboring districts, just as an opportunity for those kids who don't have the availability of a seat at Whittier or Essex Tech if it's the agricultural. So I would say there's no answer to that yet, other than it came up and we're exploring it. I don't think there are going to be a lot of opportunities because of the cost of developing those programs to be true. So again, Chapter 74 is the Mass General Law that governs that. If it's a Chapter 74 program, you get state money for that, and you have when you come out of Whittier, there are credentials, right? There are specific trade credentials that you're leaving with. So that all becomes part of that. We actually hired a career counselor as part of our guidance. She lives in that back corner of the library, in doing a lot with MyCap through the Department of Ed to start talking much earlier with kids about what they want to do with their life. You're not having to pick a career as a sophomore or as a 7th grader, but let's start having those discussions. What are your interests? What piques your curiosity? What do you like doing? Are you a kind of a technical? Are you a drawer? Are you a kind of a cerebral? I want to just think. So all those conversations are happening, but long way to go.
What are we doing with that information? So you've hired this person to come on and they're talking to people, which is great to get those conversations starting earlier, but
Our person here.
Are we taking that information and data to bring it to develop some of those classes that those students are looking for? And how does that pertain to the budget that we continue to cut year after year? I know that's a bigger question outside of this meeting, but.
So for the easy questions this evening, we're gonna, so yes, it has absolutely changed classes we've offered. So it's my career action plan, MyCap, you'll hear this across the state. It's required for 10th graders. We've done a lot of work with 8th graders as well, so to start to talk about that. So it's both are we able to offer additional programming experiences, as well as starting early to talk about interests, and then to talk to kids about is college the right path? What type of college? Is it trade school? Is it something else? So it's fairly new in the last couple of years, but absolutely it's changed programming. Yeah, and it would drive any of the CTE programs we would look for. Adding would be those that have kind of come through that discussion, that process. Yes.
I was just wondering if with this model, is there, as we're talking about Salem, is there another district we're looking at that is doing something like this, a single administration for 7 to 12, and it's working really well and we can mirror some of what they're doing, or is this pretty uncommon to have that?
It is becoming more common. So most schools in our area have looked at this or moved toward this. Pentucket, Georgetown, Manchester, Essex says, look, I'm not sure where Manchester, Essex is, Hamilton, Wenham. As we've gone, Ipswich, right? Manchester is now, okay. They're what? So they have under the same roof, I believe they still have two separate administrations. Yeah, so mostly the discussion has happened where schools that have declining enrollments and are just naturally getting smaller, and it's an efficiency, right? It's a discussion around efficiency. This has been a discussion with the school committee through the budget process year over year over year. We've maintained two separate schools. Ideally, again, we would have a 5 to 8 middle and a 9 through 12 high school. So we can say what we know we can't have. So I would, so there isn't, those that have now a single administration, that's where it becomes kind of that kind of demarcation, the line in the sand where all of a sudden is one school. There are those, and I'm not going to judge others, there are those that have kept two distinct schools. We call it the middle school and the high school with a single administration, and that's really hard bet you can acknowledge as a middle school teacher, that'd be really hard. How is it not going to be that the middle school always feels like the extra? So our thinking behind this is, if it is going to be a 7 through 12 campus, currently right around 800 students on this entire campus, the design enrollment, again, the MSBA looks to the future, assumes some kids will come back, you know, there's through choice and all that. It's a design enrollment of 895, so about 100 students more in a 7 through 12 model. Sorry, how many more kids? About 100. So we're currently about 800. It goes to 895. Call it 900.
So the strategy would be to turn the tide into boost enrollment with a new school. Theoretically, is going to help.
Generally,
Structure.
yep.
12 model where maybe more exposure at an earlier age. Kids that are interested in something, you know, they can jump into it in 7th grade, 8th grade. That's pretty exciting, I think.
Yep.
Go back to your question.
Also about buildings in our town, so when that process was done, when that process was done, the district had to go to all the towns and ask about birth rates and building permits and large developments that were on the horizon. So I know we've got like the Rowley contingent over here, right? There's a lot of potential building. They were even looking at the effects of 3A, which was starting to come in at that point, right? And can drive more kids. So they were talking about like, would kids come back from choice or choose not to go to a private school? Possibly, but a lot of this was also driven by where would towns have move-ins and how many students would we assume for each of those projects. So they have a pretty sophisticated algorithm at the state level.
Carolyn had a question.
So,
Statement, sorry.
no, it's a question. My question is, I mean, I think talking about all this in theory and what we would like to do makes sense, but to the financial statement, do we know what we're leaning towards? What makes sense from a budget standpoint and a staffing standpoint, a 6 through 8 and having 2 separate buildings, or is this more likely to be sustainable with the lower enrollment and money doesn't grow on trees and, you know?
Not supposed to make decisions too early, Karen. Like we're still thinking theory. So the reality is this. The case we will have to make to the MSBA for a 6 through 12 model is that they are investing, right, we're at 47 point some odd of reimbursable costs. We'll probably be over 50% of reimbursable costs, not actually 50% of the project, that the state is investing. They want a 50-year solution. We have to build the case both developmentally, right, we like a middle school model, as well as financially, is that viable? We know to add the space, the design enrollment for a 6 through 12 campus is 1,070. So it's 175 more students. You do basic math with square footage and what you need for spaces. It's tens of millions more for a 6 through 12 building. So that's a tough hurdle. And then the second piece is there an overcrowding issue at the elementary level that we're mitigating? Pine Grove, we're there, it's tight. I wouldn't say it's overcrowded, it's tight. It is definitely not, there is no overcrowding happening at Newbury or Salisbury. There's empty classrooms. Right, we have to play it out. We have to continue to study. We have to do our due diligence. But it will be challenging financially on a 6 through 12 model, yes.
So I want just to be aware of time, and I'm sure there's still questions that we'll circle back to. But if you're good with it, I want to kind of table the questions at the moment and let you give some feedback, the same feedback you gave from the last option, but now apply feedback to the 7 to 12 model. I want to make something really clear, though. Tonight, we're not, like this, your task is not to decide, do you feel like 6 to 12 or 7 to 12 is more appropriate? Because both options, both enrollment scenarios are completely still on the table. It's our job to study and explore all of those options and to weigh out the pros and the cons of all those things. It's really specifically to kind of truth test in a 6 to 12 model. If we go with this organizational structure, where are the pinch points? Where are the opportunities? Where are the things that have to be done for you to feel comfortable having students in a building with 6th graders and 12th graders in the same building? So the same thing's going to apply here. So I want you to answer these questions and really think about it through the lens of this model that the district is preferring, to really have this one unified school, one unified administration, where 7th and 8th grade is kind of still interacting in these grade level learning communities, whether they're teams or not. Maybe 8th grade gets to venture out to some higher level classes. But again, they're sharing common spaces in one unified building, okay? So again, I want to be respectful of your time. We were supposed to end at 8:30. We're happy to stick around. Why don't you spend, let's say, 3 minutes? This should go faster. Jot down all your thoughts, and then we'll have a quick open conversation, okay? All right, let's come back together and, oh, I'm so sorry. Let's come back together and chat as a whole group. I'm sorry. I should have, yeah. I mean, I got 2 left feet. Oh, well. Do you have it? We lost the mic. Oh, it's up there. All right, let's come back to a whole group chat. Why don't we start with this group this time, and then we'll kind of layer in things that haven't been mentioned with this back group. Who wants to share?
Who's talking? You talking? You're talking?
I love how adults, we're the hardest learners. Nobody wants to speak up.
Yeah, so I think we talked a lot about this in the broader conversation, but, I think just from an operating financial budget leverage standpoint, that unified 7 to 12 makes a lot of sense. I tried to bring up the fact that I thought it could be exciting for kids to have exposure, whether it's musical or arts or academics, athletics, if they're ready to be able to kind of observe those, more mature students and be exposed to that. I guess the counterpoint would be, are 6th graders ready for that jump into 7th, which I think is a good point that a couple of us made. But I think maybe that also creates more, opportunities at the elementary level where maybe they get that much extra at 6th grade. Because I think, the PTA and are pretty engaged, so if there was that need to have more resources at the 6th grade level to get them ready for 7th, that could happen.
That's actually, you bring up a really powerful point that oftentimes districts, the districts that have the greatest impact because of a building project think beyond the school in the project. Because if 7th grade and 8th grade start to follow a different specials, explorers, electives model, and they get to take more advanced programming earlier on, then the question is, what can we do in 5th or 6th grade to beef up that exposure to get them ready, as you're saying? So it really actually can positively impact the programs down below.
Yeah, because I'm still relatively new to Newberry, but it feels like the 5th and 6th graders pull back a little bit. And I think some of the conversations are to try to get them more engaged. What can we do to have them be excited for Boo Bash or have them want to participate in some of those extracurricular events so they feel included, but it's also the appropriate maturity level. So even if that was, band or the theater program is really strong, but just more stuff like that they can really own and then lever into, the unified 7 to 12 model.
Great point. Anybody else at this table? Well, thank you.
Thanks.
Who wants to talk at this table? Is it mostly the same? Okay, go for it.
Yeah, we said similar stuff, nothing really new. The one thing I would just add, a lot of us were saying, at least I said, I'm not an educator. I'm just a mom with 3 small little kids. So so we were joking, we're just happy with either model, it's approved. And some of us were just saying, our town in the past has not been super willing to vote yes on these things. So, on anything. So we're just talking to, what do we think is best for that would get approved? It's nice to be pie in the sky ideal. If I had unlimited budget, what would we pick? But we are realistic. And so, I don't know, at some point, I know, I love that you're exploring both, but I don't know what I'm saying. But I think that'll come in at some point, what do we realistically think can get approved? And then how do we best optimize that option?
That was exactly the thought that I was having as we were kind of exploring. It's just tell us what you think is right as educators and what we can get approved, and we'll make the best out of it. I just feel like there's not a lot of opportunity, or I don't want to say it's not worthwhile, but, we spent a lot of time talking about the 6th, grade option, and now I feel like we've had actually less time to talk about the scenario that's probably more likely. So I think that we trust you all as, educators, and once we have something we can all kind of rally around, I think that we can find the best way to make it work.
Can I go like rogue for a second and ask a follow-up question? Well, I know. I'm just curious, when you keep talking, like, we're not supposed to be talking about like what's going to get approved, what's going to get approved, but I can't help ask a follow-up question. I love me a follow-up question. In your mind, where do you feel like what may educationally or developmentally be most appropriate is not always necessarily what you feel like as a town your peers and your neighbors would get behind? Do you feel like there's something that more people would get behind? And why? What are the factors that would lead to that?
I think for me, we have like a town Facebook page, and I'm just reading all those negative comments anytime anything on the budget comes up. And there's already been comments on this. I feel like it's lopsided, like 100 to 1 of people commenting negative. We shouldn't raise our tax $1 more. So like it just feels already lopsided that there could be a lot of people. I mean, again, it's just, we were saying negative people tend to speak louder than the positive, but my early inclination, I don't know if you have any other examples, but in our town.
Plenty, but I think what we were saying when we kicked off with this is, yeah, it's interesting. We've had the least amount of time to talk about what is.
Well, we don't have to rush. Like, I'm happy. I'm sure some of you y'all want to get to bed, but I'll order pizza. Like, what do you want to do?
No, it's interesting that you might have come in with a thought, and like I walked in thinking, like, you know what, this idea of this like 7 to 12 feels crazy. That's not my experience. I've never seen anyone else have that experience. I love Pine Grove, and I'm adverse to change, but I'm not an educator. And all of the discussions that we've had, it doesn't seem that, it seems like a good option. So it's almost as if both options are feasible. I see positives for both. I'm sure there's going to be negatives. What I will say about that is the loud people are a smaller population than we think. There's repeat loud people, but we can be louder. So ultimately, we have an engaged group of people. I see familiar faces from last time. All we have to do is figure out what those benefits are, how to concisely message them, and how to express those benefits loudly, continuously, up until we get to those votes.
So just, can I clarify before you add in? So are you saying that you do feel like, bless you, it's feasible and sellable, that this is one unified campus, one unified model in a 7 to 12?
100%. But I think the sooner you get that message, I'm a marketer by trade, so the sooner you get that message clear, the sooner you get that repeatable, concise, memorable, and consistent.
Why didn't you start with that?
Sorry. I will start one if people will help me. I did it for 3A. We got it passed in Raleigh with the 3A program. I made a lot of enemies with that from that page. But I think this is important enough. I understand the fear of rising costs. We unfortunately are in an override situation already, so it's just a mixed bag of bad. But this is important, and I think there's enough people that agree this is important. So that noise can be quieted if we can be loud and we can be consistent.
Good, thank you.
And early. Yeah.
Very quickly, I just want to say, having gone through this process in Salem, we absolutely did market it, and a lot of it was the students deserve a building that isn't falling apart. And the big push in Salem was the CTE programs, because that's what the community wanted, because a lot of kids want to go to Essex Tech and very few get in. I'm an 8th grade teacher. I see who gets in and who doesn't. And so that was like the big push, like, we're going to make this building. There's these beautiful programs and beautiful classrooms. It's going to be the best high school on the North Shore. And it passed, even though there was a lot of negative voices on Facebook. So it is, I just want to say it is possible.
I think on that, though, we have to still consider, like, what is true. And while I can agree that the 7 to 12 makes sense, and if that's what the general feel is for the community, is starting to get people on board now is, like, the time we can get the PTAs behind it. I know we all have strong PTAs, but let's also be real here, right? The economy is really difficult for so many people right now. Let's look at our town meeting, right, of constantly there's pushback and budget cuts and things that have to be happening. And also, we have the outlier of Whittier hanging at our throats too, right? Of like, as a taxpayer, right, we still have to make a decision about how much are these towns going to contribute towards Whittier, and that's still an unknown. And I know that there was, Narissa, I saw your post, that was great. Thank you so much for posting that. Just getting that information out there for the people, A, who cannot participate, and that's why I think these live streams and public forums are so great, but I think we really have to come back to that. All of this is so great, and we say great things too leading up to town meeting, but let's come to the reality of it. People's budgets are really tapped for the majority of people. So while this sounds great, we still have some outliers, and there's still some people whose budgets are really pushed thin, and I think we really have to come to that reality. So if there is a preferred organizational way that makes the most sense, as a parent, I can get on board. You've presented a lot of great information tonight, especially about developmental concerns. Let's try to get people by the numbers in that way early, rather than let's spend 45 minutes talking about sixth grade if that doesn't make the most financial sense. I mean, I'm taking notes here too. So I think we just have to come to the reality of that and just really be straight with everyone, and then bringing it back to the town pages and the taxpayers ultimately who are going to vote on it.
I'm not in charge. So I entirely hear your point on this, but we have seen 2 projects fail recently in this area, and it was not based on cost. It was based on decisions like this.
Yeah, what are the projects?
Well, Ipswich is right now, they're in turmoil going back through the process, but they failed their elementary schools in 2018, I think it was, and Hamilton won them. Yeah, they're trying to combine, but it comes down to these sort of idealistic, right? What does this look like? Is it a single principal? Is it multiple? Do you have kids from 7 through 12 together, right? A 6 through 12 versus a 7 through 12. Like those idealistic things, if people have their very, very strong opinions about those things, sometimes it's really, really difficult to even get to look at a project because they're just sort of stuck in those thoughts. So part of what we're doing here is making sure that we're hearing from the public to make sure that we're not, as a building committee, right, we need to be hearing about this, and a school committee, to make the good decisions along the way, to make sure that, wherever there are, there's, sand traps, we don't get caught in them. Because we're trying to get a project that fits everything that the community needs, everything our students need, right? And it's essentially the right fit all around, and what's the right fit for, our towns, is going to be different from what the right fit for everyone else is. And as much as we can say, yes, it's about cost, which it definitely is for a lot of people, it can also come down to this. So this is an important part that we're trying to check the box on. And the school committee intentionally actually spent some extra funds to bring in Mike early, before we even started a building project, to start to delve into stuff like this, because we knew it was going to be important.
I think all of that is information that if shared can calm the concerns of a person who looks at that and says, that's different, I don't like it. If you have that explanation, especially, I didn't realize, like, that's a great asset.
Mike's amazing.
Mike's wonderful. Let's tell people about Mike. I don't want to make that decision, but yeah. Yes.
I was just going to add, any concrete examples we can give, because I feel like there's going to be the financial pushback, and then there's also going to be the idea of, like, this is kind of unusual, and how are we going to, a lot of the concerns that people had about, like, keeping people separate and everything, we've been able to be hearing and getting questions answered. So I guess the more, I don't know what the streamlined way of, like, a lot of people are not going to go to a meeting or read a whole PowerPoint, or even, so, like, to get people out to vote on this, if we can make it as streamlined and clear as possible to alleviate people's concerns financially, but also about the model itself. And I don't know what that looks like, but just.
So to what Narissa was saying, right, we're talking in this, like, theoretical realm. As of this decision around an administrative organization and structure is a school committee decision, right? That's me and my administrative team. I report to the school committee. Once this kind of decision, not 6 to 12 or 7 to 12, but what the structures would look like, The school committee will make a decision next week and say, yes, that's what we think for each of those. We put it in this thing called the Ed Plan, this really long document that outlines all of what we've been talking about for a year and a half. To your point, the marketing, we can't make a decision on 6 to 12 or 7 through 12. The MSBA knows we want to make that as soon as possible. It won't be formalized, our understanding, check me if I'm wrong, until that February submission. But all of the discussions that we're going to start having, several people have said, Dorn Whittier is going to start putting some design concepts and ideas. So all of this, well, what would you do with, or where would you put, or how would my child, all of that starts to be put into context on paper, so we can say, hey, this is a add renovation, this is a knockdown rebuild, this is, so I think how many minimum of 8, 9, 11. So we're currently at 11 different options that we've got to look at. So that will be far more public. And these type of sessions, I think we will likely draw a lot more people when we can start to say, hey, here's what a building could potentially look like. Not with an estimate yet. Someone mentioned early, not an estimate with an exact figure, but like, all right, this one's $5, like kind of like TripAdvisor, right? This restaurant is $5 signs. This one is $3 signs. So it would be that type of exercise to go through and start to be able to take this theoretical, the concerns, the realities, and start to put it into a concept. And then once a decision is made, yes, marketing, take all the help. Yeah, so we have teams, there's all things. We have a communications working group that's meeting every Friday to start to push this out. We're just still in this receiving. As the decisions are made over the next couple months, it turns far more into pushing out, all right, here's what we've decided, and we move on. Well, that was a conversation stopper. Can I answer one? So one question that was put into the form, several people put in a question about the vote. So the vote, the way the vote will work, it's called an operating budget. That's what the school committee does with the towns every year. That's what pays the bills, puts the lights on, pays all the teachers and everyone. The capital budget is what will be voted. We obviously know what happened at Whittier. It didn't pass. The same process will happen here. There are going to be 6 votes required. We have worked with the towns, and we're looking at November, 1 year from this coming November. So where are we in? August? So roughly 17 months, 18 months from now, November of 27 is when we're targeting. It would be a special town meeting, and then it would have to be an override vote. Every single one of our towns has signaled that they don't have money in the bank to pay the bill for this. So it would be a town meeting where everyone comes together and says, yes, we pass this project, contingent on an override vote, separately a ballot box vote, and it has to pass both at the town meeting to send it to the vote, and then it has to pass by a majority at the ballot box. So each town has to pass it twice, once in an open public meeting, once in the private ballot box. So that, by this fall, we're going to be making decisions a year out where we can start that marketing to say, a year from now, we're going to ask for your vote, and this is what we're asking for. This is start to talk about pictures and concepts of what we're asking for, and then certainly as it gets refined through the winter and into next spring, there are, renderings and budgets and things in full detail.
How, for these specific votes, especially the in-person one, how does the time and day get decided? I know like normal voting, how they decide, but for a special one like this, how does that get decided? And how far in advance will it be decided?
So, great question. In Whittier, or for the Whittier vote, it was a single vote aggregated across all 11 communities. That is not how our vote will work. So we will work, the school committee administration will work with the towns to determine, we would like to figure out a specific day, right? So all the town meetings are happening on the same day, one in Newbury, one in Raleigh, one in Salisbury, not combined meetings. And then the vote would likely be in a November. My guess is it would probably be at the regular November. It's not a midterms. This year's the midterms. There might not be in November. So that is in working with the towns, we would determine that.
They do have to notice the property, so every single town has their notification method and a notification timeframe on that. So,
And then like there needs to be childcare for people who
Yep.
can't, you know, leave their children at home.
There's the school committee, right, superintendent, when we have the building committee. As we go through this process, when we get to the point of where we want to say, all right, go vote for this, vote in favor of it, that's not a statement we can make. So, right, so we're talking about political action committees, right? That's all the stuff we're working on now, that folks that have stepped up to say, I might be interested, because we have to rely on others. We can provide factual information 24/7. I hope I'm invited to people's living rooms to answer questions, right, as we get to that point when we have answers. But as we get closer to the vote, it has to be a separate entity that says, go vote yes, and this is why.
Holding a group in my living room every 3 weeks, signs, phone calls, door knocking. I was standing at soccer practice, pickup, drop off, with a clipboard of one-pagers that I'd put together that were just like, hey, did you know a vote's happening on Monday? And we got childcare. Thank you for helping with that. But like, we can do all those things. But messaging it and starting now with some of this messaging, I think is the more proactive we can be, the better.
It seems like you were asking that from an access standpoint, from like the 7 p.m. town meeting, that's really not feasible for households with families. Most, maybe being a 2-parent household, and one person is obviously home with the kids, thinking about lower elementary kids, and 7 o'clock starts bedtime for us. So now my spouse is not part of the vote. So it's like an access issue.
And the fact that it's parents that benefit, that should be there, but we are by nature cut in half. So we had a first grade teacher, and then we had an organization from the high school. It was like a volunteer. Community service. Yeah, who came, and then the Boy Scouts came. So we had 3 rooms open with TVs, parents could drop their kids, and then we collectively kind of message, like we had already debated the issue, so let's not stand up here and talk for 3 hours, let's get to the vote. And all of that worked to make the process as efficient as possible. But it 100% sucks. It's not great.
So we'll have all kinds of manpower to answer questions and help with resources like that. It'll just be where we become limited, and the building committee is saying, go vote yes. Yes.
You would be issuing debt, though, to pay for the project, and then the interest is what would be increasing the budget, right? Each respective town budget. That's the override portion.
Yes.
And is that usually a general vote, like a general election? It's not necessarily a town meeting vote when it's an override, right? I think it's a general election.
So in order to have an override vote, so it's called the debt exclusion, so you pay the debt until it's gone, you have to have a town meeting that sets that warrant, or town meeting warrant that sets that vote. So it would be a special town meeting. I don't know when we get to that point. It could be that the towns decide they also need to deal with some special town meeting information, but that's, I'm sorry, I was gonna sit on you. So we'll work with the towns, but the debt will be issued by the district, and then the district assesses the debt on my guess would be 25 to 30-year bond each year based on our enrollment. That's per the regional agreement. So right at Pine Grove, the town carried the debt because the town owns the building. The district owns this campus. So it's the district's debt.
Yeah, timing-wise, a vote probably sooner than later is better too, right? For potentially some lower rates. Rate cuts would be great.
Yeah. Yeah, so again, we have to be ready to have everything, our ducks in a row. We were originally saying spring of '28, and then working with the Dore and Whittier team and PMA once they got on, we brought that forward 6 months to the fall. There is a chance, right? We've said all along with the building committee, there's a chance as we're moving through this process that could slide out a little. We hopefully won't. I don't think there's any mapping. Where's Michelle? there's no mapping that gets it any sooner than that on the workflow. But in general, we're targeting November. And again, hopefully we would have the town meetings on the same night, and we can certainly have those conversations around. I mean, towns have tried it on a Saturday or something, so we can talk about how to do that. Ideally for us, I don't want to speak for for me, having the town meetings occurring at the same time and then having the votes happen at the same time is ideal, so that we're pooling our resources and sharing that same information to all 3 towns at the same time. And again, just answering questions, not saying yes or no. But it is, yeah, so it would be debt. And I guess, the other reality is that the way it will impact Salisbury versus the way it will impact Newbury versus the way it will impact Rowley. I want to say this is the Rowley table, but right, the Rowley's talked wide and far about their challenges. It's going to impact the town of Rowley differently than it's going to impact the town of Salisbury. Ultimately, it has to pass in all 3 towns. It has to pass in all 3 town meetings, and it has to pass, simple vote, not a 2/3, but it has to pass by a simple majority at all 3 town meetings, and then it has to pass at the ballot box, simple majority, all 3 town votes. 6 votes all have to be 50.1% yes. We've been on the improvement, so we carried the debt for Salisbury Elementary School in 2000 because Triton's bond rating was stellar and the towns were awful. Since then, our bond rating has gone down and the towns are all, I don't know where they're at, A++, like they're all stellar. So Rich and I have just been working on that. We're due for a re-eval before we go out to bond. We work with Hilltop Securities. We'll go out and do the reissuing, and we expect it to improve a little bit. We had an unfavorable outlook. We now have a favorable outlook. So, yeah. Yes.
So I know it's one of my questions up there, and I know Alyssa alluded to it a little bit. Can you talk to the Whittier project and how both sort of colliding at the same time is going to impact all of this?
So I guess camera's still rolling. So I would say to you, right, watch the papers. There's lots of complications with the Whittier project. It sounds like there is a path moving forward. They have to settle a regional agreement issue before they settle a project issue. The MSBA will not allow them to move forward until they solve the regional agreement issue. To Matt's point, I have no doubt that our vote, if we can hold to that November timeframe, would happen before the Whittier vote. Great for Triton. Newbury, Rowley, Salisbury, right? The reality we're dealing with is if in the next year and a half between now and November of 27, if they're trucking along too and have another project and they know in tandem, this is great, Triton's going to ask for money this November and Whittier's coming to ask for money next November or next May, whatever it is, that is absolutely probably potentially the single greatest factor complicating the success of this project from a financial perspective. Yeah.
I've got one request and 2 kind of questions on timing. Agenda and meeting minutes, I saw the videos got posted to the website, but I didn't see the agenda for like today or like future meetings. I don't know if I just missed it or something, but that's just one thing. If at least the agendas could be there so we know, like, when we join these meetings or go to attend a meeting, that we know what we're getting into. That'd be great. And then the meeting minutes as well, just so in case we miss one, we know kind of are up to speed. That's just one thing I noticed. The other thing was, in terms of like timing, so I'm a construction manager. I know how things go in construction. It's always more expensive than, and then you go over funding and everything like that. But will the public have input into like construction, like document, when we get to that construction document development stage, like will there be sessions where the public can kind of provide input on the overall, construction documentation and everything like that? Is that a general part of these types of things, or?
So when you say input on the construction documentation, like on the costs and?
Kind of, yeah. So that's kind of what I'm getting at is like so we go for funding in November of 2027, and then we start getting into construction document development and everything like that. In some cases, what I've seen is like use of like a risk reward kind of system where you have your funding, but then the project can kind of come in under and the profit gets split basically between the general contractor and the municipality. And in some cases, that's a good scenario where there's extra money there for better development. And just like in that kind of case, like, is that an option that's open for public input or anything like that? So you may not have the answer to that. I'm more asking for like when those types of things may be coming up for input.
Yeah, so the building committee, so first on the minutes, so a meeting like this wouldn't necessarily have an agenda or minutes posted.
Okay, all right.
The building committee, if you go to the project website, down at the bottom, there's it's called an accordion. Every meeting that's held, there's like an expanded accordion.
Okay.
And there's a summary there of the
Okay,
meeting,
great.
basically minutes. There's
right.
minutes posted. We post all the agendas on Boardable because those are public meetings.
Got it.
So that's very restricted, and then the minutes go into the public system.
Okay.
So
So
those
I
are
just
linked
need
there too.
I just missed it.
But
then.
yeah, if you scroll away the bottom, like every meeting has a summary with the slide deck and everything there with a
Okay.
video to it.
Great.
As far as the construction documents, all of that process gets managed through the building committee.
Yeah.
Those are public, videoed, minuted meetings.
Okay.
And so, yes, any questions that if you want, when we get to that phase when we're talking, construction documents post-vote or even schematic designing, those are all discussions that happen at the building committee.
Okay.
And there'd be an opportunity to ask questions, follow up after if you didn't want to say in the meeting or something. The building committee, this is getting way in the weeds.
Sorry.
No, this is good stuff. So we
Curious.
adopted a procurement model called construction management at risk. And so what that means is we've got PMA is our owner's project manager, right? They're us. They're defending us on our
Yeah.
behalf. We've got Doran Whittier is the designer. And then with construction management at risk, you bring the construction manager in early. So the building committee voted to take that approach. We've applied to the state. So that would likely mean mid-late fall. We have going through the procurement process for the construction manager. So you're similar to that kind of risk reward where the construction manager who's going to build it is kind of doing the final mile design alongside the designer in the district and the OPM to avoid you get to the design bid build where the designer says one thing, the construction manager says, that's a stupid way to design it. And the designer says, that's a stupid way to build it, right? So you kind of do that final mile together.
No, that's great.
So
yeah.
that approach just was voted at the last meeting.
Oh, great. Awesome.
Yep.
Okay, cool. The last thing I wanted to ask, and again, like this kind of is further out, but one thing that my concern is during the course of construction, whether we go with a renovation or a new building or whatever, is the impact to students while it's happening.
Yep.
Has that been considered yet? Have we talked about that already, or is that something that's going to be discussed in the future as we get closer to construction?
So that would be, right, a knockdown rebuild would be the easiest scenario, right? You build a new building somewhere on this campus.
Right.
Kids stay in the current school, they move in, you knock this down. A phased renovation, so any type of renovation, or even a new build could be phased depending, because this site is pretty restricted.
Yeah.
Those that lived through the Pine Grove renovation, it was about an 18-month, 7-phase occupied rehab. So one section we had what's called swing space. You understand swing space? Mm-hmm. Similar here, we've got, call it 75,000 extra square feet. We'll be able to move kids, students, teachers around in a space, renovate a space, add a space, move them in, knock that down. So it will be purely dependent on the ultimate solution decided. But I can say Doran Whittier designed Pine Grove and dealt with an occupied rehab phase. I know PMA has dealt with several projects dealing with that. And with a construction management at risk, you tend to get larger, more experienced firms, all who will have dealt with phased remodels.
Yeah.
And so that, right, safety and security is the utmost. I think anyone that lived through the Pine Grove project, is it disruptive? Of course it is. But it is so secure, right? Construction is kept to construction. Anyone on site has a sticker on their hat. They've been quarried. And so safety and security be top priority,
Okay.
but very manageable. Yeah.
All right, great. Yeah, thank
All right. Were you going to say something about that?
I think you said it well. I came up
Okay.
Do you have to use like portable classrooms or that wouldn't be?
Again, we'll have to wait and see. I would be shocked if we needed, I'm going to put my foot in my mouth. Again, 287,000 square feet currently. Building design is going to be closer to 200. Call it 50, 60,000 square feet of extra space that we would not be replicating. I think there's a lot of swing space that would provide for very few portables if needed. Yeah.
Right, can I interrupt just quickly before you move on to further questions? I know some folks have left, and I just want to make sure that, because we had an exit ticket, that we wanted to make sure we get as many folks to weigh in as possible. So let me just ask this question, and if everybody can jot their answer down on a Post-it note. And then, no, not that. Yep, no, we've changed it up. You just don't know it yet. Well, I don't know.
Narissa is not.
Yes, I was going to say, yes, Narissa is. I apologize. I just didn't want anybody else. I want you've spent so much time to make sure you get your voices heard, and then we can go back to questions. Here's what I want you to do. On a Post-it note, if everybody can take a Post-it note, we're going to do this old school style because of the internet issues. On a Post-it note, again, these were the different scenarios in a 7 to 12 model. Right, these are the different organizational models that we kind of had conversations about, and the district believed in this model where it's one unified administration, one unified school, where 7 and 8 is kind of contained in those learning communities, but they get to kind of sprinkle out 8th grade potentially into some upper level classes when appropriate. But again, it's one unified school, one structure. In the other model, we looked at keeping 6th grade a bit more insular versus really a true middle school model of grades 6 to 8, and then the high school in 9 to 12, which again is where the district landed in their preferred model. So on your Post-it note, if you can really quickly, just let us know, would you support, are you in support of the two models that the district is comfortable with in terms of these two different grade levels? Again, to clarify, you're not answering whether you prefer a 7 to 12 school or a 6 to 12 school. We're asking, are you comfortable with, in a 6 to 12 model, there would be a clear middle school in grades 6 to 8 and a high school in grades 9 to 12 with separate administrations, separate identities, but the shared core of spaces like the gym, the cafeteria, those things. Essentially what Triton is now, but just bring 6th grade over. Yeah, Brad. Well, in the 6 to 12, what I just described, that's letter B. In a 7 to 12, it's mostly a combination of C and E, which is why I'm not dictating a certain letter to them. So, on a Post-it note, would you support these two different models within the 6 through 12 and 7 to 12 structure? And if so, tell us why. Does that make sense, what we're asking?
You're asking, do you support the two models that you guys have said are preferred?
Yes. For each of them.
Not which one you prefer.
Yeah, do we, yes or no?
Yep.
And tell us why. Yeah, and just jot a note why. Yes, this makes sense because blah, blah, blah. Just so we have a clear understanding so that when the school committee votes, they can have a sense of understanding. Yeah. Yes. Yes. It would still be two separate schools, two separate, yep. Mm-hmm. So essentially, do you support B in a 6 to 12 model? And do you support a combination of C and E in a 7 to 12 model? And just put it on a Post-it note and you can put it up on the board on your way out. And then we can certainly go back to more questions. I just wanted to make sure that nobody else left before you got to weigh in. All right, while you're doing that,
I was going to say, we can send out this QR code and actually like the URL generally publicly to say, hey, if you have questions about the project, this is the place to start aggregating them. So we'll share that, and if there's other things you think of, certainly don't hesitate to reach out. I think you all know my email, how to find me.